I had the boyfriend, the baby, and the business all before the age of 30. And I didn't have any time left for the fourth B, which is to breathe. I was 28 years old and I was having panic attacks. So I was like, let me try a new method. And I tried it and it worked.
Sharmadean Reid is a founder, writer, and creative consultant who in the last 20 years of her career has launched an innovation-led salon, beauty tech startup, and now a media company, and was the first Black woman to raise over £1 million in venture capital in the UK.
I worked so hard to have enough money to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It gives you freedom, but it kind of crushes your soul.
I was 24. I'd had habitual burnout. I was in hospital, ICU, and my body had given up. I had to make a change. Anna, you talk about this a lot in your book about finding purpose.
I have this big belief that whatever you are doing between the ages of 12 and 15 is what you should be doing for life.
I'm your host, Sarah Ann Macklin, and I'm on a mission to uncover the maze of health myths around nutrition and well-being and guide you through my 7 pillars of health. Join me on a journey of discovery and connection and pull up a pew for a front row seat to the most exclusive health conversations of our time. Welcome to Live Well, Be Well. I've loved watching this community grow and especially starting to meet you all in the comments section. But one thing, although our views are going up, our subscribers aren't. So I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button as a thank you if you've enjoyed any of our episodes. It allows us to bring bigger, more exciting guests and more continuous content. So if you've enjoyed it, just like a gentleman's handshake, please do subscribe.
Sharmadean, welcome to Live Well, Be Well. First podcast live. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so exceptionally, first of all, proud that I've got the first book of new methods for women sat right here in my hands, where you had to scramble in the warehouse to get yours. I have been thinking where I start this conversation from, because there's many different elements where I could go with this. And for me, you're best known in the beauty industry. You started the Wild Nails, you launched Beauty Stack, you were the first Black woman to raise £1 million in VC. You have now written a book, New Methods for Women. You are also the founder of Stack World, an online community for women. And I thought, where do I start with this? There's so much in there and so much personal growth that's come out of all of your entrepreneurship. So I wanted to start actually with best advice, because you've written a book for women. And I want to know, over the last 20 years, because you talk about this kind of 2 decades of experience, what's been the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
I think one of the most practical pieces of advice that I was given was to get out of the weeds. Because when you are deep in your work, when you're hustling, trying to be as productive as possible, you can fuss over every single little detail and it's actually pointless, because as a leader, you've got to zoom out, get macro, see the bigger picture and look at what is in the future, as well as like understanding and seeing what's in front of you. That's what I would say is a practical piece of advice. But one of the pieces of advice that helped me become the person I feel I am today is that all anyone ever wants is for you to be you. And that I think about that all of the time. And now it's one of my personal principles, is that I remain authentic, because all anyone ever wants is for me to be me. And the minute I try to be somebody else or do something else or act like what I see, in the media, it doesn't work for me and it actually turns people off. So yeah, I would say, what you probably know about the book is it's part personal development, part professional development. And I always try and work with these 2 sides of my brain, which is, the more nurturing, softer, compassionate side, and then the more focused, driven, what should we do next side.
Mm-hmm. The female and the masculine, mixing them together. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to do. And that brings me to one of the parts in the book that I absolutely loved. And it's something that I personally am working on a lot and have worked on a lot, probably since I was 20. And it's self-worth. And you've opened up a lot about self-worth. I think it's a really big word, especially for women. How do you define your self-worth?
It's interesting, because I'm not sure I mentioned that phrase in the book a lot as a neat encapsulation of something, but I definitely would say that the entire journey of the book is about finding your self-worth, self-belief, self-confidence, self-design. It's really about that autonomy and freedom of choice. So when I think about self-worth, I think of it in an amalgamation of all of these things to do with self and to do with how am I really sure that I'm making the right decisions for me based on what I think is right? So low self-worth to me is when you are absorbing way too many external factors to determine who you are and what you think about yourself. So I urge women reading this book over and over and over again to shut as much of the external world out as they can, at least while they're doing this period of work on themselves. And it is an active process, and it is a period. So I think rebuilding your self-worth requires you to be very militant about it. You have to, this is why the word boundaries is so popular, right? You have to be so strong and firm in your boundaries when you're at your most tender, because otherwise your self-worth is liable to just go backwards or regress while you're doing the work to build it up. Do you get what I'm saying? So to me, self-worth comes from self-reflection and self-determination and all of the other words to do with self, apart from individualism.
But I say it right, and you said it in such a beautiful way. But with people that are successful entrepreneurs, and I know this from starting being an entrepreneur at 16, that my self-worth was heavily tied to my success. So how do you, because as you said, a lot of this is about personal and business and bringing them together, but how do you then define and split the self-worth that if your business is struggling, how do you not then attach your self-worth to that? I think it's a really interesting area.
I think it's a really interesting area, and the way that I would look at it is it's that your identity is tied to your business. So if you attach your self-worth to your identity, and your identity is attached to your business, and of course, as your business crumbles, think of it like a chain of people. It's like one's jumped overboard and it's taking the other two people with them. It's taking your identity and your self-worth with it. Just because the business has taken a nosedive, you need to break the chain and effectively sever the ties of your self-identity to your business. Your identity to your self-worth is always going to be interlinked because that's very much part of our ego. But maintaining an identity outside of your business, I think, is critical. And one of the things that I think makes that difficult in today's society is the pressure for women in particular to be the front woman and the face of their business. So one of my essays is called Calculate the Cost of Your Visibility. And the reason I wrote that essay is because it's incredibly gendered the way that we treat female founders and male founders. And one of the biggest things about that split, apart from all, the funding gap, the expectation gap, the leadership gap, all of the other gaps, is the expectation for women to be visible and ever present, as opposed to being in the back room actually doing the work. So when your self-image is constructed of an identity that is attached to your business, then it's a house of cards waiting to fall. So I think about that a lot, which is, how have I been complicit in perpetuating my image as part of my business? And how would I do it differently next time? Like, for the next business or businesses that I build, how do I ensure that my visibility is not tied in to the revenue generation? You know what I mean? Because I don't know what the founder of Costco looks like.
That's true. But I know what the founder of Facebook looks like.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a time and a place, though, isn't it? And also, Facebook is one business out of thousands of tech startups. And let's be real, it's an anomaly. He's very clever, time and place and zeitgeist. But I would definitely say that, considering the number of female founders that are featured in the media versus male founders, that to me is like tricky. Like, for example, there was a newspaper that did 100 top UK entrepreneurs, right? In the entire list, there were only 2 women who were solo entrepreneurs out of 100. So, 2% of women, 2% of that list were women. On the cover, to promote the article, they featured both of those women. So it's really interesting how the female image is used as a promotional tactic, but actually they don't constitute what people determine to be good business. I just think that there's an imbalance there. That puts a crazy pressure on us.
Well, it puts a huge pressure on us. I think also a lot of the time now in business, which is why I think about the question around self-worth, is that you've also got to create a brand image as you're building a business. That is a lot of pressure. I think that is more known today than anything else, which is why I think that can be that huge tie of self-worth alongside that.
But I do think it's optional, which is why I say, where have I been complicit in it? I often think about the fact that when I started my business, I got a crazy amount of media and press requests. And I think it was because I was 25, I was Black, I was into fashion and dressed cute, and it was an all-round good story. It was a good press story. And I just leaned into that. I did every single interview and every single panel and every single appearance. But I do think it's an option, because if I'd had guidance and mentorship to say, you should be deal making. You don't need to be on Instagram to close a deal, which is the truth. Let's be real. You don't need to be on Instagram to close a deal. I think it's like there's a choice, and I think we feel that there aren't any options, but there are. And then it's a bit of a catch-22, because you need to get the options role model to you, but then you don't see them because they're not visible. But you know what I always revert to? I always say Greta Gerwig is not on Instagram. She's making her art, and she's making billion-dollar movies, and she's not on Instagram. So I think if you can figure out a way to create your art and build your craft and grow your business without your face and image being an essential part of that, I think that is a big step forward in your personal development. Because the way that I write it in the book is that putting all of my attention on something which is in constant decay, aka our cells, is not good for anyone's mental health.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I could not relate more to what you're saying from growing up in the modeling industry, and diverting to being a founder, but still having that ultimate pressure.
I always have thought since I was young, I don't know how models or actresses do it, because you're in an industry where you're constantly rejected and your brain can't really discern between, oh, you're just not right for this job, versus you shouldn't exist on this planet. And if you've been doing it since you're 16, your brain isn't even finished developing enough to ascertain the difference. It's like every single time you're being told no, that is a no on your very existence. And I think that is soul crushing.
My number one rule is that health should be personalised and tailored to the individual. But it can be hard to do if we don't know where our current health status is. Are you someone who's been trying countless supplements and health trends but end up feeling no different? Before you even start thinking about these things, it's crucial to assess where your health status currently is. That's where OptimallyMe can make a world of difference. OptimallyMe is a health optimization platform that provides personalized health recommendations based on your unique biology and goals. It offers access to a variety of diagnostic blood tests, digital tools, and devices, helping you see the bigger picture of your health, whether it's metabolic, gut, hormone, mental, skin, or cardiovascular health. This is where your foundation of health should start, with the understanding of where it currently stands. What I love about OptimallyMe is it allows you to analyze your health biomarkers and personalize your health journey. You can start your personalized journey with the full body MOT and DNA epigenetics blood tests. These tests assess multiple areas of your health and determine how lifestyle and environment are aging your body. Once you have your comprehensive health overview, you can start to connect your wearable devices and work with expert health coaches using the OptimallyMe dashboard to support your health. And here is a little something for you. Use the code LWBW20 to get 20% off your order, because your health is personal, and so should your health plan.
No, it is. I mean, I think every single model has the lowest self-worth that there possibly is. And I think, it's a big pill to swallow and learn. And that's why, even reading your book around the personal growth sector is something that I have changed in the last 10 years. And now into, obviously, Live Well, Be Well, but everything that we do around mental fitness is so important, because for me, my success kind of finished in that, from burnout and from a complete lack of self-worth and self-esteem.
What was the point when you decided to change?
I was 24. I'd had habitual burnout. I was in hospital. I was in isolation units, ICU, and my body had given up. I had to make a change. And that was the moment when I had to go inward and figure out, how can I start making myself better for me, for no one else, because my career depended on everyone else's expectations as opposed to mine. And that was a really pivotal time for me. And I'm still really young. I felt like I had a midlife crisis at 24, which is quite young to have all that happen to you, but it propelled me into purpose. And you talk about this a lot in your book, about finding purpose.
Yeah, I started reading a book last night by Hubert Joy. It's French, so I'm sure there's an Uber there. But, it's called The Heart of Business. And I just picked it up at a friend's house, and he talks about this idea of noble purpose in work to get yourself back into that flow state. And I do think that for me, my purpose didn't actually come as easily as it seems, because it's so imbued in everything I do. So what I mean by that is, when I was a kid, when I look back now, I can see that I was hugely driven by my desire for a pat on the head from my absent father. And I talk about that a lot in the book. You have this pat on the head, you did good, well done, from my absent father, which then falls into, men at work, which then just falls into the patriarchy. And I'm like, I just want to be told I've done good. And that means that I'm going to excel at everything. And I definitely feel I had natural aptitude for things. I was pretty much born like how you see me now. And but I really was an overachiever. I always wanted to be the best, do the best, looking at the next thing. There was a lot of forward motion, not really living in the present, being like, what do I do next? And then, a series of different things happened to make me realize that, I've had this trauma, new method 5 is label your trauma. I had this trauma of my absent father. It shows up in these ways. It makes me act like this. And if I work on it and heal, then what the hell am I working for? As in, I think there's often a big fear that I hear amongst my friends that if I do the therapy and if I heal, will I be as driven to succeed if I don't have the pain, or if I don't have, like the fire in your
belly,
yeah. Not in your belly, up your ass. If I don't have the fire up my ass, telling me, if you don't work, you're not going to be safe. If you don't work, you're not going to make enough money to look after yourself. If you don't work, you're not going to get that gold star. That fire up your ass keeps you in a forward motion. And if I douse it through healing and self-care and, building up my self-worth and confidence, well, what will I do? And I definitely had a period of massive numbness because I didn't know what was driving me forward. And then I remembered everything I'd done since the age of about 20 has been women related. So I didn't think about gender or race really at all until I moved to London, because I was very much in a bubble where I was in my family in hometown. I moved to London. I started to think about gender. I was pretty much a teenager. I made a magazine about women in hip hop. That's basically the beginning of my gender journey. And somebody told me that I was a feminist, and I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not a feminist. Like, we ain't hoes, we ain't feminists. And I had this incredible older woman, a really well-known photographer in the hip-hop community called Martha Cooper. A really well-known woman in the hip-hop world called Martha Cooper told me, you are a feminist, this is a feminist principle. And it made me learn about gender, about equality, about feminism, about capitalism, about patriarchy, all of these things that we don't learn in school, right? So then when I started to think about what drove me, I could see really clearly by looking at my past, age 20, making this magazine, by looking at my present, which at the time I had my nail salon and I was building Beauty Stack and thinking about, this period specifically I'm describing, I would have been 28, 29. I would have been thinking about building a software system for a while. And I could see how in the future, what my life's work was and what I couldn't possibly imagine not caring about was women's equity and women's rights. So then that became the replacement for the pat on the head. It was like, let me find my purpose and let me find my mission in order to keep myself going so that I'm not desperately seeking the attention of older, successful men to validate my entire existence.
And that was your catalyst for change, do you think?
I don't think I had a single catalyst for change. I think it was just a series, I describe it in the book as like death by 1,000 paper cuts. There were just so many things happening to me that I was like, if I don't change, this is the what the catalyst is?
Mm-hmm.
Getting pregnant. I was 25 when I got pregnant, 26 when I gave birth, and I had a tough, not really, I don't want to say I had a tough childhood, but because I was very well loved. But we all have our trauma, right? So I kept thinking, I don't want to pass on intergenerational trauma to my son. I was very early in thinking about epigenetics and neuroscience and thinking, okay, so if this trauma is encoded in my genes and I'm going to pass it on to my unborn child, I'm going to have to work very hard to break this cycle. And I thought, what is required of me to be the best mother I can be to this child? And it started out with body, actually. So firstly, I started eating well. And then I started thinking about cortisol and hormones. So this is like 2010. I was thinking, so that means if I'm stressed, I'm creating a hormone and he's just drinking it like Kool-Aid. I don't want anyone around me who's going to stress me out. Then I did hypnobirthing. I had a natural birth. I was like, I don't want him to be born with fluorescent lights and screaming. I was just it was the first time I was very conscious, aware about how every decision that I made about myself was impacting this tiny unborn baby. And then, so that was a big catalyst for me, is how do I break the intergenerational trauma? And then I have another one, which is a bit more woo-woo, which is...
Love it. Bring it.
I did a reading with a Vedic astrologer about past lives. And I kept thinking, what if every version of me in history was a fatherless girl making a series of bad decisions because of her fatherlessness? And I thought, I could picture myself in medieval England, as a pauper because I couldn't get my shit together. All of my anxiety and my stress and my trauma, I just couldn't get it together. And I thought, all of the women in my past lives are counting on me. They're counting on me to stop this cycle. They're sick of it. They don't want this Groundhog Day. And that was a big thing for me. I was like, what if I came back and that the next version of me, it was relaxed? What if the next version of me was content? What if the next version of me was secure and, met her life partner very young and got married and had a nice, happy life for 60 years? Like, what if that was the next version of me because of the work I did today? Which sounds a bit crazy, but,
Well, it's not, because in a way, you just said, breaking that cycle. I think every single person listening to this will relate to that word in one way or another. I know I do. And I'm saying it actually in a really truthful way, that when you're in it, and I don't have a child, but you had a child. You're still quite young. You're in your mid-20s. You are building a business. You've already had past businesses. How do you get to that point where it's like, okay, new lease of life, here we go? What was your step to that next part? Because it sounds amazing, but it's that, what's the method? How did you get there?
When I call it the 3 Bs, I had the boyfriend, the baby, and the business all before the age of 30. And I didn't have any time left for the 4th B, which is to breathe. I didn't have any time for myself. I didn't have any space for myself. I felt like I was being pulled in every direction. And what happened was, and this was really the impetus for writing the book, actually, is that I was 28 years old and I was having panic attacks, but I didn't know they were panic attacks because people weren't calling them that. I just had this crazy chest pain. And the one time I went to the hospital and they were like, "Are you stressed?" And I was like, "No." But she was like, "Well, your body is." And I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And I thought, what if I try to meditate and isolate the pain where the panic attack starts to control it? So I was like, let me try a new method. And I tried it and it worked. And I was like, okay, so I didn't have another panic attack for a decade. I was like,
And the method was meditation.
The method was meditation, but also there's a very specific muscle in my shoulder blade that I store my stress, and it starts twitching, and then that starts causing the chest pain. So I would isolate the muscle, relax it, and meditate, and it just worked. So I was like, I actually remember someone on Facebook said, "Oh, if you've got chest pain, it might be related to some back muscle issues." And that's what triggered the thought of, let me just have an awareness of where it is. So at 28, Saturn's return, everything's crazy, I'm overwhelmed, I'm having these panic attacks. I tried the method, isolated it, and it really worked. And I got my mojo back. I got my energy back. I started to relax myself through the meditation and take everything in my stride. That lasted 4 years before I was on another plateau of overwhelm, thinking,
This age you're
32. And I was like, what is going on with my life? Like, what am I doing? Is this the right path for me?
And where were you in your business at this point?
So in my business journey at 32, I think I just registered Beauty Stack as a company. And I was doing my deck and I was on my beginning of my fundraising journey. But I was really full of energy and full of beans. But I was also, separating from my son's father, which we separated, a couple of years before. But Roman was still very little and it was really hard. And it was just a lot. There's just a lot going on. Like, my friends used to laugh at me and say, "Oh, looking at your life exhausts me." And I'd be like, "Try living it." And I look back and I can't even comprehend how I did all the things I did. I used to not even have time to go to the toilet sometimes because I'd be so back to back to back. And I think at 32, I was definitely at a crossroads of thinking, how do I do work and fulfill my purpose in a more efficient way? And I thought that tech and startups and VC was a way to do that. So what I mean by that is I was running my nail salon, which is a very labor intensive and very present job, right? You've got to literally be a shopkeeper. You've got to open your shop, be present for your customers, run your staff, everything. And I was like, I would love to do, I came from a very techie school. I was like, I'd like to build software which I think will generate impact at scale. So rather than affecting 20 people in a salon a day, I could affect 200 a day or 2,000 a day. And that's kind of how I approached it. But all I was doing was out the frying pan into the fire.
Straight in
like Flynn, in like bloody Flynn. I went into that world thinking it was going to be different, and it was just more of the same, packaged in a shinier wrapper with lots of more money and this dream of a utopia where everybody can be involved. And it just wasn't like that. But I didn't learn that. until another 4 years later when I was 36. And then I had another, people say healing isn't linear, and it truly isn't. It was like I'd have a really good forward motion. It was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1. It was like that all of the time. And it was only on my 39th birthday that I woke up on the day and felt really relaxed and content and was like, okay, this chapter of my life is done. And that's when I finished the last essay of the book, which is Rip It Up and Start Again, when I made a really clear decision that it's now time for me to shift to the next phase of my life where I can pursue my noble purpose in a way that goes back to my creative elements and less of my logical elements. And that's kind of where I am now.
I want to share something that's helped my skincare routine, the Bon Charge Red Light Face Mask. Red light therapy is fantastic for your skin because it helps reduce inflammation and increases collagen production, making your skin look healthier and more youthful. The Bon Charge Red Light Face Mask uses the optimal wavelengths of red 630 nanometers and infrared 850 nanometers light to deliver these benefits. Now, someone in my early 30s, wrinkles aren't a huge issue yet, but the minor lines I did have are already smoothed out. And what really surprised me was how well this mask works for acne. It helps settle the acne quicker and reduces any dark spots afterwards. It's been a real game changer for those unexpected breakouts. Now, prevention is key for me, and using this mask is a great step to help reduce the signs of aging. It's also become vital in my self-care routine. And during this time, I incorporate the meditation practice, making it one of my favorite times of the day. So if you're curious about how red light therapy can help your skin, I highly recommend giving it a try. Go to boncharge.com/livewell and use the code LIVEWELL for 15% off your order.
But it's amazing, right? You speak very analytical and very spiritual at exactly the same time, which in business...
It's because I'm a Gemini.
That's why. both sides, both faces. So what is the next phase?
So the next phase for me is still thinking about that women's equity and thinking about what is the best way to help people understand that the game is sort of rigged. That we really believe that we're going to make a difference through capitalism, and we're just not. So what is the alternative mode of existing that can work for your soul and can work for your economic independence? Because I think the two are really important. I definitely spent the first phase of my life from 0 to 40 focusing on my economic independence. I worked so hard to have enough money to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And it gives you freedom, but it kind of crushes your soul. For some people, it might be they're working in finance or they've worked their way to be a CEO finally. And I look at those women leaders and I know the pain that they've been through. I know how hard it has been for them to climb that. And I just think, why should we struggle? Right now, I'm thinking more and more about how do I create that economic independence while also maintaining a sense of creativity, maintaining a sense of autonomy, because that's the most important thing for me, but also having a new way of working. I hate this phrase work-life balance because, I love my work and my work is my life.
I don't think it can exist, if I'm honest.
I just think from a terms point of view, I just think that like living with purpose and being paid for it is the goal, right? So I do think about this as well. Like, how do I create ownership in the things that are important to me to allow me the freedom to do what I want? So I'm quite preoccupied at the moment with ownership and equity and what that looks like in a non-greed, power, dominion over others way. So that might look like IP or royalties or commission or, property ownership or startup equity or all of these different things where I don't need to kill myself for 10 hours a day and show up at every single thing just to survive. So yeah, I'm working on a few things right now that I'm really excited about. I'm really excited about the next phase of the stack world. I decided that this year I was just going to take things easy, which even in itself is a big step. I've never really had a year of not growing my bit. I've never ever done that.
But growing yourself feels like quite a different conversation. That's what I feel like it's been like
for sure.
you.
This year has been about growing myself, but I've never, since I was 19, not thought about growing my money or growing my business. And next year I'll go back on the business, and I'll be there again like normal, but I'll be doing it in a different way,
in an intentional way.
Not just intentional. I think I've always been intentional with everything I do. I'm very lucky in that way, to always have very clear visions and steps and intent and purpose. I think I'm just going to build in a way that prioritizes how I want to work. I've spent a big part of New Methods for Women designing how I want to live, like how I want to exist. But now I think, okay, so the next business I build, I know for sure that I don't want to be CEO. It's not even a question. With no hesitation, I do not want to run a company. What I love is the idea generation, the founder bit, the startup bit, the 0 to 10, the brand building, the ideas. I'm really good at partnerships. I'm just good at ideas, but I don't find fun in the management part or the scaling of company versus the scaling of ideas. So now I know these things about myself. It means I can build in a very different way, and that might mean building a little bit slower, but I'm also okay with that. So, I think everyone is kind of redefining work for them right now. Everyone is. Whether it's I'm not going into the office 5 days a week, or I don't want to work for this company that doesn't represent my values. I feel like everyone is redefining how they want to work. And I feel really good that I have a very clear view of the next few big projects that I want to execute, how I want to do them.
I think it's one of those things. I spoke about purpose earlier, and I want to just go back to it a little bit because it ties into intuition, which is method 8 in your book, Trusting Your Intuition. I'm a massive believer in intuition, and it's so important. Even recently, it's given me a big wake-up call personally, where my gut is feeling a certain way, but my head's telling me to do a different thing. And I think it's one of the most critical ingredients in personal growth, but also in business. But we can quite easily, from the external environment, disconnect from our intuition. I think it's a really unspoken area. And when we think about purpose, and I want to say it because the listeners or anyone watching this on YouTube might feel really lost in their purpose. And like listening to you, it feels so clear in your mission about what you want to do. But I think a lot of people struggle with this word, purpose, and really struggle with the word intuition. But I think they go quite hand in hand. What advice would you give to anyone kind of listening to this and obviously feeling like incredibly inspired, but also feeling at the same time totally lost?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I have this big belief that whatever you are doing between the ages of 12 and 15 is what you should be doing for life.
Really?
Yeah.
Podcasting was not around when I was 12 or 15.
But were you standing in front of the family talking or interviewing or just being a chatty person?
Yeah, that was me.
Exactly. So, when I finished the book, I did a 10-week short version called New Methods Season 2, which was really like, what is your Season 2? Because that's what I'm calling what I'm in now, the Season 2 of my life. And in one of the episodes, I said, remember what you loved as a child. If you remember what you loved as a child, you can trace a through line to your future. So I went around and I asked all of my family, what was I like as a child? And they told me. They're like, you were always asking questions. You loved telly, loved media, loved radio. You were always hanging out with the adults. You were always asking why. And I had this feeling that I really, a big part of the execution of my purpose was like interviewing, media, hosting, and I asked them, and I found all of these photos of me they were like, you were constantly reading books and telling us about what was in them. So all of these are like, it's building a picture of the person that I was naturally before I realized that I had to be part of a system. Because when you're 12 years old, you don't really think about yourself as part of a system. You just do whatever you want to do. You might have like teenage pressures, but they're sort of different. I'm talking about work and purpose here rather than just self-worth. It's like at 12, I knew I wanted to be in fashion. I knew I wanted to be in media. I was obsessed with chat shows, Oprah, Ricky Lake. I was obsessed with film. I used to watch Sky movies constantly, and my radio was my companion. So I'm getting like literature, media, and I always cared about equality. I felt like injustice. I didn't have a name for it, but I was just really incensed by injustice. And like, I come from a really strong female, powerful women family. So all of these things together are telling me that the answer to my purpose of gender equity was not just about building software. It was about communication, media, messaging, community, conversation. It was all these peripheral things to the product. And then I thought, what if they were the product? What if it wasn't about like doing a podcast as a means to promote software, but instead the podcast was the product? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
And just flipping it around like that. So I would say, the first line of new methods of the 5 things I say is you already know what you want. You already know what you want. You just have to uncover it through quietening your mind, listening to yourself. So listening intuitively to what you like doing. And, when I first started this work, it was very simple, asking myself, what do I like? I had a list on my phone. Do I like this? Do I really like sailing? Or do I pretend to like it because that's what my posh boyfriend's family likes? Do I really like steak? Or do I eat it because I want to look like one of the boys? Do you get what I'm saying? I was constantly trying to figure out who I was through self-inquiry. And it just started out that simply. So discovering your purpose to me is a combination of reflecting on your past and what really got you going between 12 and 15. There's something about the age of 15 where you start to go off key.
Why is it 12 or 15 for you? Why is it those 3 key years? What was it?
I think it's like you get your first taste of freedom from senior school and you start to choose a bit of things yourself, like now my son's choosing what he wants on the menu instead of me just ordering for him, because that's what you do when you start growing up. But then at 15, I think there's a crazy amount of pressure to choose GCSEs. For me, 15 is when you start to enter the label making. Because the minute you are forced to choose GCSEs, what you're saying is, this is the job I'm going to do when I'm 25. And I think that's crazy amount of pressure for a 50-year-old to have. And you start making choices for other people. So I met a guy the other day who was telling me that his daughter, the A-levels his daughter was doing, how, someone said she had a real aptitude for film, but she's going to choose biology instead. And I went, whoa. What's she doing biology for if she really cares about film? And they're like, well, what can you do with film? And I'm like, well, if it fires her up and she doesn't actually want to be a scientist or a medical person right now, which, is a different conversation, then let her explore her passions and not make these decisions so that you can say at a dinner party, my daughter's got an A in biology, which is really what it's about, isn't it? So yeah, so going back to that advice, it's like to find your purpose, figure out what you loved between the age of 12 and 15, remember what you loved as a child, constantly question your present. What do I like? What fires me up? Where am I in flow? Where do I get the best feedback from others? What are people saying to me that I'm kind of brushing off? People always used to say to me, oh, you're so inspiring or you're so empowering. And I didn't see any worth in these things because I was like, well, I've got to do the work. And then those two things will help you draw a through line to your future as to how you can merge all of those things together. What your family says you are good at, what people are telling you you're good at today, to think, what can I do tomorrow? And there are many different methods, from Ikigai, the hedgehog method, or
The what method?
hedgehog.
What's that?
So it's from Jim Collins, Good to Great, and it's kind of like the Ikigai. It's like, what are you good at? What can you be paid for? Like, what drives you? I think those are the three things I'd need to check. But the hedgehog method from Jim Collins is another version of the Ikigai, which is another version of the Dharma, and all of these ancient methods to modern methods are simply saying, where can you merge your passion, your craft, and your income together?
I'm so excited to share something that has been a game changer for my business. As a nutritionist and a health professional, having an online presence that truly represents my brand is crucial. I built my website on Squarespace nearly 10 years ago now, and I'm so excited to partner with Squarespace and share with you the all-in-one platform that helps entrepreneurs and health professionals like us thrive online. Now, when I started to think about building my website, I was a bit overwhelmed. Now, you don't need to worry, because the Squarespace Blueprint AI makes it easy. It feels like having a personal design assistant guiding me through creating a site that looks professional and uniquely tailored to my brand. It's been amazing for showcasing my services and connecting to you, my audience. One feature I love is the members sites. I've set up exclusive sections for my inner circle members to access premium content like courses, recipes, books, and expert blogs. It's a fantastic way to offer extra value, build a stronger community, and generate steady income. And let's talk SEO. Squarespace has built-in SEO features to help make sure my website is optimized for search engines, making it easier for people to find my site and join my community. If you're a health professional or brand looking to elevate your online presence, I highly recommend Squarespace. It's been vital for growing my brand and making real impact. Check out squarespace.com/livewell for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LIVEWELL for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Honestly, listening to you speak feels like you've done so much healing. I know we spoke about healing and kind of trauma before. Where do you find the time when you're running everything?
I said,
It's actually a really silly question, but I'm just kind
no,
of...
you're right. It's a great question, because I was just talking to someone yesterday about it, and I was saying to them, it's constant. It's literally constant work. And there is not one day that goes by where I'm not doing something to help myself. And I always find the 12-step programs such an incredible free resource, because they say to you, you are always an addict and you've got to constantly work at not being an addict. For me, I used to go to SLA for people addiction, right? Like codependency. So I would take a walk, like weekends were quite sacrosanct for me. I would do these really long walks listening to podcasts about codependency. I'd listen to a lot of Margaret Paul or Codependency No More. I always read books. I'm a big believer that in the modern age, if you're busy, you have to read, even if you're only going to read half the page, because otherwise you'll never finish the book. So if I only have 2 minutes to read, I will read for 2 minutes and I'll put the book back in my bag and pick it up again. But I would say it's really constant. And I would say healing is this ongoing journey, right? And I can see still where I've got work to do. But for the most part, my anxieties now, as I prepare to turn 40 in 3 days' time, are just completely different to what I had at 25. I just don't feel the same way. And that, I just want to give anyone hope for that. Anyone who's the problem with my feelings, right, is that they weren't extreme enough to warrant like serious attention, if that makes sense. It was more like I'd have these existential crises. I would be a bit numbed out, a bit disillusioned. It was more existential than anything else. And, I was quite good. I wouldn't say I was self-abusing. I never really drank. I've never done drugs like that. So it wasn't that. It was more like I knew I wasn't being my proper self. I knew I wasn't operating in my full potential. So, it wasn't enough for me to go to the doctor I just had to keep doing little bits on myself to get my drive back, because my drive and motivation are so important to me. It's like my energy is really important to me. So I just had to maintain them all. And I just, I think the healing that I've done so far was very incremental and I would say constant practice. But I'm a bit of an extreme person. So rather than do therapy every week, I would do 3 months of intensive executive coaching. Or rather than again, instead of doing like therapy, I would do 9 weeks of hypnotherapy, or I would do 10 weeks of acupuncture. Do you get what I mean?
Isn't it?
I almost feel like I was collecting healing methods.
Yeah.
There's a chapter,
I know.
Choose Your Healing.
I'm very far into it. I think I'm quite similar to
I did them all. Something, I've got to say that I loved that period of my life. I loved it.
What age were you?
So it would have been 2014 when I was really experimenting with going to as many different practitioners as possible. And the reason I advise this is because some people just fall into the first healing thing they do and stick to it, and then they exhaust it, and then they don't know what else is good. And also I'm very nervous about cults and gurus and things like this. So I'm a big believer in having a roster of healing, almost like a wardrobe of healing, and looking at what you need today to help you get back to equanimity. So, just trying everything from really out there to like cord cutting and witchy ceremonies, all the way to like your Myers-Briggs and simply doing that and figuring yourself out. I just did lots and lots and lots of stuff, and it was super fun. And I would do it instead of going to the pub, instead of, that drink after work. I remember, one of the favorite things I did, I don't think I actually wrote about this in the book, which is a shame because, it was so good. I found a woman in Tottenham Hale who was this Rastafarian woman who taught a course called Healing with Herbs. That was in 2014, I remember that. So I would get the bus from Muswell Hill to Tottenham Hale, and I would be in this little community centre, and she'd take us on these foraging walks and teach us how to make herbal tinctures and cold remedies. And she said something that made me like so emotional. She was like the first Black person I'd ever seen say, we're all just stardust, we're part of the cosmos. And that made me cry because I'd been brought up in a church family of creationists, yeah? So I'd never heard anyone who looked like me express that we are part of a cosmos. And I loved Carl Sagan and so I just pretty much like started crying in the room because I was just like, she's speaking to exactly what I want to hear right now. And the things she's teaching me are the things that women have passed down amongst each other for generations and generations, and I've lost that intergenerational connection of goodness. I've only ever heard the intergenerational trauma. So yeah, I would do things like that. I would take myself by myself.
Take yourself on a date.
I'd take myself to these weird things. I talk about this Colombian cacao drinking ceremony I did in Watford as well. That was the same year. That year I did loads. I did medieval monk healing baths. So I would get these German bath salts that like medieval monks used to have these like immersive baths. I went to Hindu temples on Sundays to like just worship and eat the good food. And I was literally like a buffet of healing.
Wow. But I find that exceptional. I think I, very similarly to you, can go healing full on every day. I was finding myself in crystal shops when I was 19, living in New York, feeling where the energy of the city was so intense and I felt so lost and I just felt gravitated. And it's not because, a lot of this show and all of the show is like rooted in science, but spirituality is one of those things that we never talk about that much because it can be met with a lot of criticism. But I think the most important thing about spirituality for me is the connection that you feel when you connect to it. And I feel very at home when I feel that there is something there that I can live, breathe, feel hope in, and feel connected to in a way that I can't quite understand, but I know that it's around me. And I think that's a really beautiful, I think it brings it back to your body. Anything somatic, anything in nature, as you were saying, all of that is somatic healing. And there is so much goodness that can come out of that.
I think this science versus spirituality question is a really interesting one. And I also do think it is that similarly gendered perspective, right?
Completely agree.
In that I always think that science as we know it today is just a few hundred years old, like post-enlightenment, let's call it. It's peer-reviewed, it's constantly evolving. It has rarely involved women and women's bodies. And we have this ancient wisdom which has literally kept us alive, because what is spirituality if not the practices that allowed our ancestors to live, to literally physically stay alive? But there's no written record, it's not peer review, so I would say that I love reading science and the growing areas of science. There's always new areas of science, but I always think people take this as absolute gospel when it is still in progress. It's still a work in progress. And there's so many things now that we believed 100 years ago that are known to actually be totally fake.
Yeah.
You know, how I describe it in my book is the wandering womb. I find it crazy that doctors for literally thousands of years, since the ancient Greeks, thought that the womb was a thing that moved around women's bodies, causing them headaches or making them sick. Do you get what I'm saying? And people thought that for a very long time. They had issues with race. They used eugenics as a reason to eliminate black people. So when there is a mistrust, particularly amongst indigenous communities over science, you've got to kind of ask yourself, where does that mistrust come from? Where when the science has been used against you, over and over again, whether it's infecting black men with syphilis or giving Puerto Rican women the early pill because they use them effectively as guinea pigs. You're like, well, why do brown people still believe in spirituality? Why would we? So I think while I love science so much, like I'm really fascinated by genetics, I'm really fascinated by neuroscience, I am endlessly curious about the human body and how we operate. I do think it's worth remembering this is in the grand scheme of human history, this is a nascent industry. And just use your wits about you when it comes to trusting what people say. I think women's bodily autonomy is constantly being contested, as we know. And that, to me, is a sign of a lack of modernity. So if we, I think if we're allowing lawmakers, scientists, etc., to make these grandiose sweeping statements about women's bodies, but you also want us to trust you, I'm still a bit, I'm a bit itchy about that. But I would say that for me, when I go to the doctors now, when I need professional medical health care, I really make sure to assert my autonomy in that process and to assert my choice and my voice. And I had to do it when I gave birth. I know a lot of my friends didn't feel that they had a voice in their labour. There was a brilliant article in the New Statesman all about birth trauma, which I just devoured because I thought this is so true. But I just think it's a thing where you've got to use your wits about you. Of course, I'm going to listen to a doctor telling me that I've got this tumour that needs to be gotten rid of. But when you are in tune with your own body,
it's a big thing.
And you live with your body every single day, I think that the power dynamic between the patient, your voice as a patient, and the voice of the doctor is really skewed right now. And I think they should be more equal. That's what I think I'm advocating for, that neither spirituality nor science takes precedent over the other. But in fact, both spirituality and science and patient and doctor can work in harmony to find the best solution.
Well, it's about the mind-body, isn't it? And I don't say mind-body connection because we had Ellen Langer on here who is phenomenal Harvard scientist. It's not about the mind-body connection. The mind-body are one. It's a one soul unit. And I think we really forget that. So it doesn't matter how analytical we could be in our minds. It's all in the same system. So having those two in equilibrium is fundamentally important for just your health in general, in everything.
I think that principle that I've just mentioned to you, I think I actually take that into so many different areas of my life, which is that why is one thing more important than the other? Why is this genre of music more important than the other? You know, now that I'm talking to you, I'm actually thinking that this has definitely been a driving force for me, like philosophically. Like, why is opera more important than hip hop? Or, you know, why is this one type of human has a higher perceived value than another type of human? I definitely think that's driven me in my work and curiosity. And part of becoming content and losing anger and becoming peaceful is understanding that we are just part of a fabric of society where everything has to interact and work together. And actually, rather than think about things in a divisive way, I always try and think about things in a harmonious way. So I can listen to Beethoven and listen to Notorious Big, like that's perfectly fine. And neither one should be not only judged more than the other, but I shouldn't have to play a game of knowing about more one than the other in order to be accepted by society. Do you get what I'm saying? So I spent a big part of my youth, and I feel like women have really from birth been taught to contort themselves to be whatever X wants them to be, whatever their parents want them to be, whatever their partner wants them to be. So they're constantly code switching and shape shifting. And I think all the time about teenage boys and girls or heterosexual relationships in your early 20s, when two people, one's interests and hobbies start to dominate the other. So do you get what I mean? Like, it's a bit like the cool girl monologue in Gone Girl. I don't know if you remember that. You know, he's into rockabilly, so you're a rockabilly. Like, he's into partying, so you're the most partying, fun-loving chick ever. And it's that contortion of our personalities that means that we start to lose our own.
Yeah, we lose our identity.
You lose your identity because you're constantly contorting. And I think, why is it not okay for me to enjoy the things I want and for you to enjoy the things you want? Why is it not okay for me to think about my past life witchiness, but also to really care about CRISPR? Like, it's actually fine for me to do all of those things. And I don't need, you know, forget about you judging me. I shouldn't feel that I have to push one to the forefront more in order to prove my worth to you.
Totally. And I think that comes a lot with self-awareness and feeling very, very accepting in your own skin. And that, it does, right? Because once you kind of actually go, I totally accept myself for who I am, I have complete self-compassion for who I am, I don't need to fit into that mold.
You know, one of the things I would love anyone listening this to test out, because I did these, as you can tell by the book, every day was an experiment and every day was a test. One of the things I did for an entire period was go to dinner parties or social events or business networking events and really not introduce myself, really not talk about myself, and just try to be elusive and not list off the accolades that I knew would make people lean in and listen more. So you go into a room and you know what to do. We all know what to do. You go into a room, you're at a friend's barbecue in London Fields on the weekend, and everyone's making small talk, and you know what to say to make people listen to you.
We had to do this last week at a dinner we were at together.
Yeah, but you know what to say.
Yeah.
So you're looking around the room and you know your personality is a library and you know what books to pull off the shelf to get them interested. I did this, I'm into these things, you're into that, I'm into that, no way, we're the same. And I challenge you to not do that and just be like, I'm working on a few things, what about you? And keep batting it over to the other side and just see how it feels for you to not base your self-worth on, or your self-acceptance in a room, on a list of status points. It's really difficult to do, but it's a good challenge for yourself, because how do you define yourself when you're not defining yourself by these status things? How do you define yourself when you don't say, well, I was the first Black woman to raise $1 million, or I've had this business, or I started this, or I founded this? Like, you know, sometimes I'm just a bit like, I'll lazily be like, oh, you know, do a few things.
It's a big thing, right? Not defining yourself by your identity of what you do. It's actually the things that make you joyous and happy, of how we should be identifying ourselves. And I'm sure if I say to people, who are you? They'll probably label everything that they do and
They'll
who they
list
are.
off their achievements. You know, when I say to people right now, when I meet them, I say, what's exciting you right now? And then they'll talk about something 90% of the time it's not even related to work. And then see if you can go through an entire dinner without figuring out what someone does. That's interesting.
I think that could be the best place to end on this, because we started with self-worth, which is interesting because you're like, it's not that much of it. I was trying to find the chapter where I found a bit about self-worth, but so much about your journey, your personal journey, has been building up your self-growth, your self-acceptance, and that naturally pulls into work. It naturally pulls into business. When you believe in yourself, it's actually when you have the biggest success. And you have, and you're so inspiring. And so I always ask this question, and I'm really excited to hear the answer to it, which is, Sharmadean, what does live well, be well mean to you?
Live well, be well means to me the freedom of choice. It's as simple as that. I want to wake up every single day and feel that my life is my own. That I can do exactly what I want to do, when I want to do it, with who I want to do it with. And I think I got that.
You got that at the age of 40, you were living well and you were being well. I'm so excited for everyone to read this book. I feel incredibly privileged to be the first one. New Methods for Women. Go and buy it now. It is out. It is an incredible read. And thank you so much for coming on to Live Well, Be Well.
Thank you for having me.